Hi, I'm Mayor Jenny Durkin. I would like to share a special greeting and express my appreciation for the part of the Tibetan community has placed in the livelihood, culture, and community of our city. Tibet Fest plays an important role in Tibetan culture and language preservation, especially given the marginalization happening now in Tibet, as it connects young Tibetan Americans to their roots, culture, and language. We all benefit. The festival also provides for inclusive engagement for people of all backgrounds in Seattle. Please accept my best, warmest regards for an enjoyable festival and continued success to the Tibetan community in the city of Seattle.
Tashi Delek, and welcome to Tibet Fest. My name is Tashi Sholpa, and I'm one of the MCs for this event. I'll be joined by Sunam Nyatsang, who will be the MC in Tibetan. On behalf of the Tibetan Association of Washington, I'd like to welcome you to the 26th Annual Tibet Fest. We will once again be hosting a virtual event where you can enjoy the festivities from the safety and comfort of your homes. So welcome to everyone across our social media channels for tuning in. We're excited to show you a program filled with performances, a food program, profiles, and so much more. Before we get started, we'd like to thank all our supporters and sponsors. It's because of your support that has given our Tibetan community the chance to thrive. It also makes Seattle a unique, welcoming place to be, to live, and to raise our families. It's with much pride that we call the Seattle metro area our home. We're hopeful that this year's event is entertaining, educational, and empowering for everyone regarding the arts and culture of Tibet. Let us begin by respectfully acknowledging and recognizing the ancestral native inhabitants of the land we are on in Seattle, as we read to you the Native Land Acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge the territory in which we gather for Tibet Fest at Seattle Center as the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people. This acknowledgement reminds us to strive for the respectful partnerships with all people as we search for collective healing.
남부조 공감상 마 녀상 스노트게이 년차로 인게나 가면낭예디 든춘벨라르 데레센시낭예 창마라 워싱턴 비미치든 속배 섭슈네 데실레슈유 장어리 묵창기 나데 워싱턴 게서 세럴키 롱바당 직순다민기 제고 페스티벌 셰베 콩 Tibet Fest 벽에 투쟁 탱 니슈서를 바디 니동 니슈단다 고비 주그 군접 내엠기 겐체제 타게규 아니 워싱턴 비미치된 속바탕 세를 게서 냠루기 안구리슈유 한 다른 제고대야 먼저 벽에 투모 마인베 시나 탑드 벽이 세 아니 릭제베 모두 근데 남자 망고시도 한 남부서 통예보유베 레버시고요 먼저 고모중년데라 먼저야 튕규로 남년기 진다탕 아니 겹조와 아니 믹스에 산내기 먼저 된데 페미솔 초르냠된 나오데라 투치체스 슈에이 대 제고 고모중원데 먼저대 산내기 룩수라 Native Land Acknowledgement 제제 슈에지레 안디 당부슈초지 이게 자로 슈이 먼저 테링 Seattle Center라 벽에 두제 숭진 슈세 서디 마모 아리 유미 양나 되메 미리 코셀리시 뮤규기 사인바 물론 슈고요 텔라테네 먼저 지존나 너세 강중나 변주와 구십타 냠루토 수십체네 소다비용we 정수슈고요 샴라 먼저 선주롭데 룹주스 어리당 벽계갑신벽계로 별람슈고이 아니 남부서 고샤나로나 도지셰.
Now please rise for the national anthem of Tibet and the United States of America, performed by Tibetan language and culture school students.
So proudly we
Thank you, children. And I'd like to introduce you to the Tibetan Association Washington President, Tenzin Topchen, to give us his opening remarks. And greetings from our newly elected Sikyo, also known as the President of the Central Tibetan Administration, Bemba Tsiringla, on the occasion of the 26th anniversary of Tibet Fest.
Tashi Delek. My name is Tenzin Topchen, and on behalf of the Tibetan Association of Washington and the Tibetan community in the Greater Puget Sound region, it is my honor to welcome you all to the virtual celebration of the 26th Annual Tibet Fest. Although the COVID-19 situation is getting better here in Washington, we have opted to celebrate Tibet Fest virtually this year in adherence to the King County's health guidance and for the safety of our spectators. Tibet Fest is a part of a 24 festival series, and this year's theme is Where the World Gathers. Keeping that in mind, our local artists and performers have shot their traditional and contemporary dances and performances all around the places that are near and dear to our heart, including Sakya monasteries and the Seattle's gardens and parks. This gives us an opportunity to showcase our beautiful city to our international viewers. This year, Tibet Fest also highlights the stories of early Tibetan immigrants to the Puget Sound region, as well as highlights the work that the Tibetan Association of Washington has done in the past year and a half. The virtual celebration of the 26th Tibet Fest would not have been possible without our co-producers, the Seattle Center, and the generous grant we have received from King County's For Culture and Arts Funds. Thank you for your generous support. I would also like to extend a thanks to Heidi, Vivian, Jennifer, the Seattle Center team, and the entire Macau Hall staff for making this virtual event possible. And a special thanks to all our sponsors and supporters. Last but not least, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude and appreciation to all our performers, artists, the Sunday Tibetan Language and Culture School staff, Gyal Harikla, parents and students, the TAW board, and all the volunteers who have tirelessly worked to make this event possible. Please enjoy our virtual celebration of the 26th Annual Tibet Fest.
It's my pleasure to wish Tibetan Association in Seattle for organizing the 26th Tibet Fest in Seattle virtually because of the pandemic. And I'm sorry to state that also because of the pandemic, I'm not able to travel personally to Seattle to be part of the festival. But nevertheless, it is a very important event being organized by the Seattle Tibetan Association over the last 26 years, starting from 1996. And such kind of programs that are held annually has been very, very beneficial in creating more awareness about Tibet and the Tibetan people and its history and environment and all other aspects of Tibetan culture, religion, and way of life to non-Tibetans. So to all of you who are taking part virtually in this Tibet Fest, I wish you would have the opportunity to learn more about Tibet. And I also wish to thank the members of the Executive Committee of the Seattle Tibetan Association for taking the effort even during this pandemic to showcase Tibet to the non-Tibetan audience. And I wish you all the very best, and through this program by creating more awareness on the issue of Tibet. I'm sure more and more of you will be interested in Tibet and will also extend your support to the Tibetan cause. Thank you so very much, and whenever the opportunity arises, I'll definitely make sure that I come to Seattle to meet with you, and hopefully by next year, if the pandemic is down, then we shall definitely meet personally in Seattle, and look forward to a physical interaction at that time. Thank you so very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sikhyonla, for your greetings. This year, we're incredibly grateful and honored to have the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts, also known as TIPA, accept our invitation to perform at Tibet Fest. TIPA was founded in 1959 by His Holiness the Dalai Lama with the hopes that Tibetan musical heritage and the associated arts and culture would be preserved through our exiled community. After over 6 decades since its inception, the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts continues to hold a high standard and has already trained 3 generations of Tibetans in exile. In addition to providing state-of-the-art training in music, theater, and dance, TIPA also prides itself on the research done through their carpentry and handicraft departments that create all the traditional costumes and musical instruments. We are in for a visual treat today and are thrilled to start Tibet Fest with their first performance, the auspicious Singha dance, also known as the Tibetan Lion Dance. We hope you enjoy this performance.
달루 벽이 두진라 슈가르 다람살았네 벽이 도가 쳐봐 염주 나무 때야 믹세 거소 첨부유 아니 도지체 벽이 도가 쳐봐디 콘스쇼기 지동국이야 납중하고 놀라 아니 우니 고주부지래 안데야 단다 로축주나라 먼저 팀모 마인베릭 숑디 냠발라소 마님 공배 용아이기 아니 좀데 항상 중요된 건지 지초를 해서도 안돼야 다래 잡던 카니 고리십 나네 잡던 당보디 생참
Next, we have a short video highlighting the work of the Tibetan Association of Washington and the Tibetan Language and Culture School in the last 2 years.
Tashi, my name is Tashi Delek, and I am the president of the Tibetan Association of Washington. Despite the incredibly difficult last 2 years, the Tibetan Association of Washington has continued to organize and facilitate fundraisers and events to assist our community through this difficult time. In 2020, we received a $1,500 grant from Utsav India that we were able to redistribute to families that were impacted by the sudden job losses during the early onset of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We led a small group of volunteers to sew 300 plus cloth masks with filters. We then distributed them to our community members, frontline workers, and volunteers around Seattle. Since the early onset of the pandemic, our former board member, Dr. Sonam Nyatsala, who is an infectious disease expert, has held informational presentations about the COVID virus in English and Tibetan in order to keep our local and international community safe and well informed. We are immensely grateful for all his contributions. Recently, he was also part of a group panel discussion organized by local organizations, including King County Public Health, to lead discussions on the Delta variant and vaccination updates.
TW also raised $430 for Meals on Wheels, a nonprofit that delivers food to the elderly. And as the effects of the pandemic wore on, we raised $1,900 for North Helpline Food Bank in honor of His Holiness's Nobel Prize celebration. But we were also not immune to the effects of the pandemic. Our funding sources were severely limited. But I'm happy to report that in 2020, we were able to secure $13,000 in grants and sponsorships, and in 2021, we have secured $15,000 in grants so far. We are critically dependent on these funds to support our programs and events, such as Losar celebration, March 10th protest, Panchen Lama birthday celebration, His Holiness's birthday and Nobel Prize celebration, and not to mention our flagship event, Tibet Fest. But these funds also support our day-to-day operational expenses. So as our community grows, it is critically important that we work towards increasing our funding efforts. Finally, I'm very happy to report that even during the pandemic, some families were able to contribute towards our community center build project. The community center subcommittee worked on a feasibility study and continues to work hard to making that dream a reality.
Though we are not able to gather in person, our monthly prayers led by Khenpo Chamba Rinpoche at the Sajya Monastery continue to take place virtually. And we are really grateful to Sajya Monastery for allowing us to use their venue for 2 rounds of CDA, Sikyon and Chidu election. To ensure the safety of all community members showed up masked and strictly followed the social distancing guidelines.
In April, when India's second wave of COVID-19 infections hit, it led to a sharp drawdown in medical supplies as well as hospital beds. In response, here in Seattle, we collectively raised a little over $5,000 towards those relief efforts. We'd also like to extend gratitude towards Tibetan Youth Congress, Tibetan Cancer Society, as well as the SFT in India for organizing and leading such a great effort to distribute those supplies to the impacted communities.
And lastly, we would like to highlight the work of the Tibetan Language and Culture School students. We would like to thank our former TLCS director, Mr. Namgyal Tribala, for all his hard work and dedication for the past 2 years, and Tashi Delek to Mrs. Srinyuto Shortla for being elected the new director of TLCS.
2021 meant a continuation of the virtual version of the Tibetan Language and Culture School. Despite the challenges of virtual learning, our TLCS students have shown great resilience. This year, we started using Google Classroom to organize interactive lessons and to make homework easier to assign, submit, and track. We have used online resources like tallytibet.org, as well as apps like Kahoot and Google Slide presentations as well to make learning more fun. We were able this year to revive our Level 1 class for our youngest students, as well as our weekly music lessons to all students aged 6 through 15. Our diverse curriculum covered a wide range of topics, including Tibetan visual arts, history, geography, and the environment. We also had topics like managing emotions during difficult times. We were fortunate to have a guest speaker share their wisdom on this topic, as well as others, including a Tibetan human rights activist and a Lama on his life in Tibet. We also introduced social, emotional, ethical learning check-ins as part of each class. We celebrated holidays like Tibetan New Year, Losar, and also days like Earth Day with our annual Service Learning Day, cleaning up beaches at Golden Gardens Park with current and alumni families. We hope that more students and families will join us in our mission to learn more about the Tibetan language and culture, all while building community inside and outside of our virtual classroom with the Tibetan children and families of the diaspora, as well as with our Washington state and global communities.
In addition to facilitating and organizing events throughout the year, the Tibetan Association of Washington, the Tibetan Language and Culture School, and community volunteers have put in countless hours together for yet another virtual Tibet Fest. Though we're hoping to celebrate in person next year, we're very grateful that we found a wider global audience and we were able to do this virtual screening, and we want to thank each and every one of you for joining us and celebrating our collective work. Fujiche. In a spirit of solidarity and peace, the next performance by the TLCS students is a song of healing to remember and honor those we've lost in this pandemic and the collective grief we are all facing together. We send our best wishes and prayers to everyone during such stressful times. We hope you enjoy this performance. Mane Yido.
Tashi Delek, Tangma Kumkamsang, Nga Washington, Pemi Chitin Sofe, Sanju Klopte Loptuk, Leon Yasatangi. Taja COVID Jubu, Kungab Nayam Gab, Misaya Mangpola, Kanye Tang, Tetong Doyefa, Kenkere. Nangpa Sange Be, Lapchat Soudi, Semjen Tamjen La, Cham Ningje Tang, Rokwa Chea Dere. Zamling Yong La, Semso Tang, Dung Sem Nyamke, Shugiye. Ngamso Washington Sanjuk Lopte Loptuk Ne, Cheyang Mani Iduk Pigi. Nampato, Shide Tsorwe Melam Shugiye.
Tashi Delek. I hope you're all doing well. I am Calvin, a student of the Tibetan Association of Washington's Tibetan Language and Culture School. During this difficult time of the COVID-19 pandemic, many have suffered and many lives were lost. The essence of Buddhist teaching is compassion, to serve others. We empathize with those who have suffered and those who have passed away. To them, we offer this prayer song called Mani Yidu. From all the students of the Tibetan Language and Culture School, we hope it will bring some comfort. Thank you.
Part Shikya Nake Me Tama Jeto Simde Me
Omni Ngaki Goden Dashishi Pende Base
Mani Norbu Jere Siki Tukde Ishi Ki Norbutan Nerdub Nankin Sen
Tashi Nani
Next, we have a solo performance by Densel Dontong, and she'll be performing a Tibetan religious drum dance in honor of Melarip, a Tibetan master, yogi, and poet who led an inspiring life of spiritual progress. The dynamic movements are an offering to the yogin in the form of dance, and we hope you enjoy this performance.
리 비 도저 팔쇼 일레니모 도용거쇼 저다그모라 도나 조진동만다 지자마라의 주도 그셔야 고르셔야 고르야쇼
제자는 다가 졸라마나나 이달라 칸투 추쇼나나 소안데
We are now excited to have our local dance group Trisung perform again this year. The first performance they will be doing is called Puyi Samling Gomba, which is a song from the Doba region of Tibet. We hope you enjoy this performance.
아
Thank you to the Trusung Dance Group for their enthusiasm each year at Tibet Fest. Despite the rain here in Seattle, their spirits were not deterred as they shot most of their performances at the Seattle Rose Garden and at Gasworks Park. And we really hope you enjoyed their performance this year. Next up, we have Kiki from Himalayan Dumplings. Kiki is a Tibetan American food vlogger, well known for raising awareness for Tibetan culture through the lens of her food. Her Tibetan cooking is met with sold-out crowds at her local pop-up events in the Portland, Oregon metro area. And for her food segment today, she'll have a Tibetan favorite really. It's called stovetop bread, but in Tibetan it's called amdo pale. So we hope you enjoy our food segment for Tibet Fest this year.
Tashi Delek, everyone. Welcome to the annual Tibet Festival. I hope you're having a wonderful time enjoying the virtual program. My name is Kiki, and I am the Tibetan American food blogger behind the platform Himalayan Dumplings, where I shine a light on Tibetan culture, specifically through the lens of food. So today, I want to share about a little-known bread in the Tibetan cuisine that we call amdo pale. My hope is to demystify the process of making amdo pale so you can enjoy this delicious Tibetan bread at the comfort of your home. So let's get started. Pale is the Tibetan word for all things flatbread, which is what it literally translates to in Tibetan. Our Tibetan cuisine actually includes a very wide variety of breads that is not very well known outside the Tibetan diaspora. Here are just some examples of Tibetan pale that I have made over time. This one is made from all-purpose flour. This pale here is made from whole wheat flour. Here we have one that's called numta pale, also called wishang pale, and the list goes on. So what's the story on amdo pale? This is a historical map of Tibet. And Amdo, located in the northeastern part of Tibet, made one of the three main regions of historical Tibet. It is also the region where His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama was born in, but unfortunately when Tibet was invaded, a lot of land grabbing happened, and the Amdo that you see on world maps today is half its original size. Our traditional foods have a story to tell, and I hope you will find this added layers of cultural and historical context meaningful. To make the dough for the amdo pale, you start off first with all-purpose flour. To help the dough rise, we are going to use instant yeast, which does not need to be activated with sugar. You can add it directly to the dry ingredients like I have and mix it really good. Next, I'm adding some olive oil. Any type of fat helps tenderize the dough, so it'll give it a really nice texture to our amdo pale. Next, we're going to add some melted butter. It can be salted or unsalted. I prefer salted. Gives it a really nice rise again to your dough, but also a really nice crust and flavor to your amdo pale. Once we've mixed all the dry and the wet ingredients, the final step is to add warm water in order to form the dough. Whenever I make dough, whether it's for momo wrappers or for making ting momo, Tibetan steam bun, and also with amdo pale here, I add the water slowly, a little bit at a time, so I have a lot more control in forming the dough. I can make sure that the moisture really goes through every particle of your flour so you can form a really nice dough. With amdo pale, the goal for your dough is to make it a little tacky. It's not going to be very firm. It'll be quite soft, in fact. And the final step is to lightly grease your dough ball. Your dough ball does not have to be smooth or perfect. Just lightly grease it because we are going to let that sit and ferment. Once you've let the dough rest for at least an hour, you will notice that your dough has almost doubled in size. You let it rest a little bit longer and the size will get even bigger, and your dough will have a lot more volume and fluff. This time around, it'll be a lot easier for you to knead your dough. And because we have greased the dough ball, you won't even have to dust your surface with flour. So this time around, you want to knead it really good and squeeze out all the air bubbles that are formed in the dough. And you'll keep kneading for a couple of minutes, and we're going to let the dough rest for at least another 15 minutes. While we rest our dough for a second time, this is a perfect time to lightly grease our tray and preheat our oven. And look, the dough is going to be really nice and soft and fluffy and very easy to knead for a couple of minutes before we portion them out and cut them into 4 pieces like I'm going to show you here. Remember now, traditionally amdopale is made family size, probably about 8 to 10 inches in diameter. It's cut into slices and each family member gets a slice or 2 to eat. I decided to make mini sizes, so in individual portions, because for one, I personally love crust, having crust all around. And 2, when I'm making large batches, I simply freeze them so I can have it whenever I want. So take each of the individual portions and make them into dough ball. And using our palms, just like I'm showing you, first I try to make a dough ball and then slowly using my hands, my fingers specifically, try to shape them into circles like I'm doing here and then flattening them as I go. You see that it's quite thick. Maybe like a bagel, probably actually thicker than a bagel. But don't worry, once you bake them, the insides are nice, little bit of chew, but still some softness, and the outside will be nice and crusty. You know, if you have one of those muffin cutters, you could also use that as well instead of trying to shape them manually using your hands like I'm doing here. You see how thick it is? It is characteristic of an amdopale. It's almost like a bread cake. It's very thick. So once your oven is ready, place your slightly flattened dough balls onto your pan. Be sure to leave a few inches between because they will bloom and increase in size. Here I'm simply using olive oil to coat the top of each of the flattened dough balls and placing them into the middle rack of the oven. That's where the temperature is perfect. So if you have a timer on your oven, you can use that. But if you don't, you can use the alarm in your phones like I do. Oh my goodness, I use them for everything. But anyway, here they are 15 minutes later. I am applying some more olive oil on the top before I flip them over to the other side, and I'm going to apply brush some oil on the other side as well. I am going to set the timer for 15 more minutes once I've flipped the amdopale to the other side. Alright, 15 minutes is up. It's smelling really good. I wish you could smell it, and it's looking good. And now it's gonna look and smell even better because the final flip is going to be just for a few minutes, and I'm applying generously some butter. Butter makes everything better, right? Oh yeah, it smells so good. So this is the final 3 minutes. And look at that. Oh, it smells so good. And here they are, mini amdopale. They are so perfect, if I may say so. Really toasty and crunchy on the outside and just just perfect inside. You know, when it comes to amdo pale, there is no hard and fast rule on how you can eat it or when you should eat it. You can have it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I like dipping it in sipping like I'm doing here, which is what we call hot sauces in Tibetan. My daughter absolutely loves amdapale as well. I hope you enjoyed that little segment on Tibetan cuisine. If you are interested in learning more about Tibetan cuisine and culture, I'm at Himalayan Dumplings. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for watching, and you enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you, Kiki, for that wonderful segment on Tibetan Amdo Pale. Kiki also strives to teach a global audience through her cooking videos on YouTube, and she's also very active on her social media channels. So please give Kiki a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Himalayan Dumplings. Next up, we have Washington State Representative Storm Peterson with a message of support and greetings for Tibet Fest.
Hello, and Tashi Delek. Washington is a welcoming community for immigrants and refugees. And as a legislator, I know the decisions we make must reflect those values. I've been proud to support the Tibetan Association of Washington and the Tibetan Community Center project. I'm excited to continue our partnership and advocacy together. The Tibetan Community Center will help preserve the Tibetan language, history, arts, culture, and traditions. And it will help break down barriers to access resources and services that are critical to the success of Tibetans who come here to Washington. Last year was especially hard for our communities of color, immigrant and refugee neighbors who disproportionately faced worse complications and higher rates of death from COVID-19. This year, House Democrats made the commitment to use an equity lens to guide our budgeting and policymaking decisions. For instance, we invested $405 million for the Immigrant Relief Fund for people left out of federal stimulus payments. And of course, the pandemic also exposed deep divides in healthcare access and affordability to underserved communities. Because of that, we also invested $41 million for healthcare services for uninsured and underinsured patients, regardless of immigrant status. These investments and many more will ensure we recover together. This is critical to preserve, celebrate, and honor the value of all Washingtonians, including our Tibetan neighbors. Congratulations on hosting the 26th annual Tibet Fest. I'm thrilled to celebrate with you and honored to stand with you as a member of the Washington House of Representatives.
Next up is a family band performing the song Tsangi Ajo. Please welcome Tenzi Tarkela and his children Gunze and Gesar.
Jala
Next up, we have a flute player from San Francisco, Lobsang Gyense, who's also a former Tipa artist. He dedicates this composition to Tibetan elders living in Tibet who are slowly passing away and might never be able to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Tibet. We hope you enjoy his moving flute performance.
Tamlo testele entari marangi she taya di ni pene tsuta kyangul mishi so ta lama ni tama ta pele ni kyambo to chondu gore ni kyangul mishi che ra me de tamba ni konto chondu de tamba ni susugi nyengo gala ya ma dusche Kosha di last just chingu di da lamale meta onde dedo chi tsowa chini ani marangi tariki luya di remechoyan di pyugyi tama testle
Thank you.
Next up is another local group called Chosun Pomo. They'll be performing a song and dance by Tsiring Gyume called Togang Poki Gorshe. This is a united circle dance by all three regions of Tibet, Dötö, Dome, and Utsang. Please welcome the Chosun Pomos to the stage.
Yagi shupe tingcho lai la Yagi shupe tingcho lai la So ya la Hamme ullo puhu chunki teri So ya la Hamme ullo puhu chunki teri
Thank you to the Chosun Pomo Dance Group. Each year, these ladies bring infectious energy to Tibet Fest, and we can't wait to have them perform live in person at our next gathering. Next, we have Robert Neelums, the director of Seattle Center, interviewing Tenzin Topchen, president of the Tibetan Association Washington, and Tsering Yudu, the director of Tibetan Language and Culture Schools.
Hello, I'm Robert Neelums, director of Seattle Center. I'm happy to be offering words of welcome to the 2021 Tibet Fest, an event that is part of Seattle Center Festival. Festival is a series of 24 ethnic cultural festivals produced by community organizations in partnership with Seattle Center. I'm pleased to be speaking today with two wonderful members of the committee responsible for producing Tibet Fest, Tenzin Topchen, president of Tibetan Association of Washington, and Tsering Yudu Short, director of Tibetan Language and Culture School. Thank you, Tenzin and Tsering, for being here with me today, and for an extended thank you to the current committee, the past community leaders who have collaborated with Seattle Center Festival since 1995. Welcome.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you to the Seattle Center team for the opportunity to talk about the Tibet Fest and the committee that works on this wonderful event.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, I'd love to start by asking about the work that the Tibetan Association of Washington provides throughout the year. The Language and Cultural School programming seems central to your efforts behind the festival and beyond the festival. So can you share a bit about that and what's going on?
Sure. So the Tibet Fest is the biggest program that the Tibetan Association of Washington does in the Seattle area. So the main goal of the Tibetan Association of Washington is to preserve and promote the Tibetan culture and language that is unfortunately being marginalized under the Chinese occupation in Tibet. So it's our responsibility as a Tibetan diaspora to preserve and promote it, and to be able to pass it to a younger generation. So Tibet Fest is the main program that that platform that we host to promote our unique Tibetan culture. And beside that, throughout the year, we have a calendar of events that the Tibetan Association of Washington does, including the Tibetan New Year, which we call Losar, and His Holiness birthday that happens in the summer, July month. So those are some of the programs that TAW does beside the Tibet Fest. And one of the key programs that we do is the Tibetan Language and Culture School, whose director currently is Tsering La. So Tsering La can talk more about the TLCS.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is really close to all of our hearts to try to preserve the Tibetan language and culture. We began in 2007 when we first met in the basement gathering room of the gathering space of the Sakya Monastery. We serve kindergartners through high schoolers. Currently, it's kindergartners through middle school is our current student body. And the mission has always been to teach, to expose our young students to our language, to our culture, while also building community. So as time has gone on over the years, we've come to recognize just how important building connection and building community is, both within the classroom walls for students who end up coming to see this as an affinity group of other Tibetan students, where it's a stark contrast to how they experience life in their own schools, where they might pretty much be either the only in their class or the only in their school. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really special way for kids to connect. We have tons of activities. We have an interactive curriculum, even in this virtual learning format. Our Zoom meetings involve lessons with using Google Slides and Google Classroom and all kinds of online resources. tallytibet.org is a resource for Tibetan language learning that we've been using. We have volunteer teachers as well as a professional music and dance and song instructor, Larik Dakpa, who is an amazing resource for our community. So our kids have now learned music this year. They've learned how to do Tibetan class through Zoom, and it's been a lot of fun. We also engage in a lot of community service organization fundraisers, and we always have annual Earth Day beach cleanup, kind of our effort to do a service learning day. So yeah, that's just a little bit about our school and our efforts.
Wow, that sounds like a fun place to be and a lot of learning going on. So I want to acknowledge the year-round effort dedicated specifically to organizing Tibet Fest for the Seattle Center Festival.
Mm-hmm.
There are many, many, many volunteers providing their time, skills, and talents. Can you offer some behind-the-scenes perspective about your experiences producing this event, and how does it all come together?
So this past 2 years have been a little different from how it usually been done. So usually before the pandemic, everything is being hosted physically at Seattle Center and the Loft in the last weekend of August, right? So after the pandemic hit, and that's when our board member took the effort of organizing the Tibet Fest. So it's been a little bit challenging at first in 2020 with all the uncertainties of whether we can host the Tibet Fest or not. But thanks to the wonderful support and resource from the Seattle Center, we were able to host a virtual event last year, which was our 25th anniversary. And also this year, due to this pandemic still raging on, we're hosting a virtual one. So with the virtual, it's a little different in terms of organizing it. You have to pre-plan a lot of stuff ahead of time. For example, a lot of the recordings that we do are being done right now in June and July, so that the performer can do the recording and then we can stitch them up to be ready to be streamed in the month of August. So a lot of pre-planning work is being involved in this. And for this dedication, we have a committee of board members of 7 wonderful volunteers that serve as the board member for TAW that helps in planning this Tibet Fest, along with our special Tibet Fest coordinator, Tashi Sholpa, who does the wonderful job of coordinating all the performances, communicating with the performer, getting the timeline, communicating with the Seattle Center people. So there's a lot of work, the teamwork that's happening behind the scene prior to the day of the streaming that makes this wonderful events happen.
Wow, well, I'm a little exhausted listening to all that. You know, we at Seattle Center deeply appreciate collaborating with the Tibetan Association of Washington to present Tibet Fest as part of Festival. We enjoy working with your organization, and we enjoy getting to the experience of the art, the musical performances, the dance presentations, and workshops. The Cultural Festival helps make Seattle Center a unique place, a unique public space for all to experience it. What about this partnership is useful for your community?
So the Seattle Center has been a really vital resource and helping hand in promoting the Tibet Fest for the past 26 years. Without the Seattle Center and without the help of the City of Seattle, Tibet Fest would not be possible. The amount of resources, the training, the funding, and as well as the guidance that the Seattle Center and especially like Vivian, Heidi, and Steve back then helped us tremendously in making this Tibet Fest go for 25 years and hopefully beyond many, many more years to come. So I think I would like to thank the Seattle Center for all the partnership work that they have provided us in terms of giving us training, giving us the platform at the Seattle Center to showcase our unique culture. Serena, do you have anything to add regarding your experience as a viewer at the Tibet Fest?
Thank you. Yes, you beat me to it to thank Robert
Awesome.
and the Seattle Center, but I wanted to add to that because not only do you give our people a voice and a forum in which to share our culture and to express our culture and make connections with our greater community, but you also imbue within our students and families a sense of belonging. It might be the only institutional sort of encouragement or acknowledgement for our families and students of their, very, very proud culture. And so I just want to thank you for that because in those two ways, the partnership with Seattle Center deeply impacts our community, and we couldn't be more grateful.
Well, thank you both. I want you to know that it is our honor to serve you. So can you tell us about the interesting partnerships Tibet Fest is developing with contemporary artists and art collectives in the broader Tibetan community?
So yes, we have in the past been featuring a lot of the local Tibetan artists, especially the young up and coming ones, as well as some of the prominent alumni from the Tibetan Institute of Performing Art, known as TIPA, which is the institution that the peak prime institution performing art that is based in India. So through that, we have featured a lot of local Tibetan, as well as some of the prominent Tibetan singers and dancers, artists. Especially last year, we had Tenzin Hamo, an illustrator, who has helped us feature the Tibet Fest poster, as well as she was part of the 2019 Tibet Fest gallery, where she did some portraits and illustration of the Tibetans that arrived early in 1960s as a lumberjack. That was the first settlers in the Pacific Northwest. So examples like that are some of the young up-and-coming Tibetan artists that we have been able to work with to feature in Tibet Fest. And last year, in the virtual 25th Anniversary Festival, we had Made in Exile, which is a Tibetan a theater group that is burgeoning in the Toronto area in Canada, that we were able to feature as part of the virtual Tibet Fest.
Wow. Well, I understand that last year's virtual Tibet Fest reached a good number of people from across the country and are basically around the world and overseas and everything. So how will these two virtual festivals impact future Tibet Fest programs?
I think the Tibet Fest being virtual last year really gave us the opportunity to go beyond Seattle in terms of our promotion and exposure. Before that, Seattle, even though Tibet Fest was physically hosted, it was mostly local. Only like people from Portland or maybe Vancouver would attend Tibet Fest and they would know about it. But because last year was virtual, we took the opportunity to be able to stream worldwide. We contacted a lot of communities that are beyond Puget Sound area, that are beyond the Pacific Northwest area, like New York, Minnesota, Toronto, as well as India and Nepal, to promote that the Tibet Fest is one of the important event that TAW does here annually. And I think this year we're also going to try our best to promote the event, and hopefully with that promotion we can have better exposure in terms of from the Tibetan media as well as the outside media, to be able to have more like broadening scope. And one more thing that we learned and that we plan to implement for the future Tibet Fest is basically live streaming it, even though we've hosted at Seattle Center. So in the past, we have been hosting it. I don't think we have ever live streamed the event on Facebook and YouTube. So that's something that we learned last year that we can implement for the upcoming Tibet Fest, that hopefully we can do physically at Seattle Center.
Well, there's a lot going on. I can tell you that. This is going to be fabulous. So thank you, Tenzin and Sering, for talking with me today about the Tibet Fest and your work within the community. I wish you, the board, the leadership of the TAW, and all the volunteers who help make the festival possible all the very best this weekend. And I hope that all of us out there will have a fabulous time experiencing Tibet Fest this year. So thank you for a wonderful event, and thank you for sharing this time with me today.
Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you once again for providing us a platform for 26 years and hopefully beyond.
Oh, definitely beyond. So thank you so much. For all of you out there, enjoy Tibet Fest and have a wonderful, wonderful time. Peace.
Next up, we have a medley of traditional performances that will be introduced by our Sunday school teacher, Ladik Dakpa, along with former TIPA artist, Turing Dokar, and our former TAW board member, Sunam Nyatatsang. And they'll be joined by our music class students who will be performing the songs together. Enjoy.
Tashi Delek, Tenge Kunghamsa, Mangotoshe, Mangotoshe di, onto Turap Churuda Chubdu Nangne, Perlaya, Tayap Chungwe, Lugagi Guzeshire. Mangotoshe Nangne, Nangma, Shebe Lugadi, onto Hasarani Tayap Chungwashtan, Di She Tangyare, Tabiare, Dige Nyam Dobostan, Zebush Yobatinteres. Temin Toshe di, onto Turkune Shugo, Hasalia Tayap Chungwe, She Shabtushiresha. And Toshe di, Nangmale, Troja Doba Yoga Tindeshiredu. Chezang on Nangma Toshe di, on the Pur Mirigi Keju Dembe, Lugargi Guzeshi Yindu, 먼저 달래 담예 진제 롭중면에 나모도시 리우 솜지 식비표 초시에 시제슈에 디식비표고의 경쟁디 조 미유니 잡지유 당보델라 먼저 달래 로디 장고를 못sel이야 거딘제 된기 로지 송지 슈기유디 만주영에 겨울이 못sel이야 거딘체 체제 르메 최양 표바단자 니보델라 먼저 다리 탑든 디규네 등상 쉔게 디게 먼저 표기 수규 나모도시에 다가나시 시에다 샵조리 덴델이 나오마스네 추테시 국투미용의 산베 레와단자 먼저용의 나모도시에 리우 솜지 시피피아 임발라나 땡게 게시 용마슈
Thank you Larik, Tsedoka, Sunam Nyatsang, and the children from the music class for that beautiful medley performance. Next up, we have Yakpo Collective, a creative platform that showcases contemporary artwork by prominent and emerging Tibetan artists. Their mission is to create a safe space for these artists and supporters to relay the importance of preserving arts to their audience. They aim to challenge the confines of mainstream media's portrayal of the Tibetan diaspora while encouraging dialogue on how art can serve as a vehicle of cultural expression. Here is Sechin Kando with Yakpo Collective introducing their Spotlight series with artist Gesang Jigme. Enjoy.
Hello and Tashi Delek. My name is Tejin Kando and I am one of the members of the Yakpo Collective, a creative platform aiming to amplify the voices of Tibetan contemporary artists. We would like to thank Den Somala and her team at Seattle Tibet Fest for inviting us to share our work with you all. Although we've had in-person exhibitions, the global pandemic challenged our collective to seek other methods in bringing art to our audience's doorsteps. One of our notable achievements was curating a digital exhibition titled Transcending Boundaries, where we showcase the works of Tibetan contemporary artists both inside and outside of Tibet. We also began the Spotlight series last year, where we interviewed well-known and emerging Tibetan contemporary artists on their creative processes and work. We would like to present our Spotlight series interview with Gesang Jigme, a budding photographer from India. In this interview, we delved into his initial introduction to photography, as well as the inspiration behind some of his favorite photographs. Without further ado, Gesang Jigme.
지단에 가 페인팅 더 페가 오유 페인팅 데 다야다 페인팅 데 컬러나 등에 아이덴티컬 계신 지유나 빠르게 니지 바이나 아주 페인팅 두스네 자양페 먹고요 더 민망보시기 빠르다 페인팅 디 컬러 다른 비지오라 진행이 컬러나 바랑이 가르지유나 페인팅 두스네 아주 빨라 아주 컬러 장고야 먹고죠레서 대자신의 컴포지션이네 컬러이네 아니 엘리멘트 디자인이네 미기 expression이네 이제 먹고지기
Gesang Jigme is a photographer who currently resides in Dharamsala, though he has lived and studied in multiple cities throughout India. After an unsatisfying stint in college spent studying physics and maths, he decided to turn instead to his interest in photography, an interest which he came to realize was his passion and which he felt a burning desire to learn and create more of.
Photography the English the Tambu di kare chujugas ne parta de dape goyu parki mikashel dua kajina kashe dungdi lona goya ga chuni ne da yang parda remote in the tawaina and jik sozo kalora neju hamang ko information manga link to it tindi tu chamba ta chuju ne nga parke parla da ni chamba senna lo ni kalore nga chuma parke ni ji chai sambe samlo de shuchi mo pedu nga tu china ta kalore susugi the misamal photography ki meaning lo yora arushna photography lo jamba ngarang ki feeling the express chisagi channel duch tinde duch ngarang ngi chira par ki jamba nga pe di chi to lore semo kuyang bo cha awa kyu cha kisi nga stress yu jamba nga chulo par ya to jamba e par ma che chi still object in the yora so kopya tinde ine re yang ki gung tinde ine re ta khaje non living things le yora tinde nga di capture chi yang chi samsam semo kyu hele and normal into some bang a chulo draw and meeting the portrait in the lane, consola gishi, consola gablogi, calore, the calore, Tungusia, the Tilicia, and movement shukchu you go to the door, the up Bargava to you.
In this photograph, Jigme recreates Jacques-Louis David's famous painting, The Death of Marat. Marat was a French scientist, journalist, and politician who was assassinated due to his opinionated beliefs and speech. The painting, then, is meant to reflect the everlasting mark he left on the French Revolution. The similarities between the two works is evident as Jigme lays across the trunk, newspaper in hand, imitating Marat's grip on the quill. This photograph expresses the difficulties Jigme faced in learning language, whether Tibetan or English. Despite his best efforts, fluency in either language was hard for him to acquire, resulting in frustrations and enormous pressure he felt was almost killing him. The newspapers scattered around him represent the words he's trying to understand, their crumpled up conditions speaking to the challenges he faced, his frustration and inability. The trunk itself acts as a symbol of the journey, trying to learn the many different languages, Hindi, English, and Tibetan, so he could cater to the different communities he lived with. Despite their forlorn posture, the way both Marat and Jigme clutched their hands onto the quill and the newspaper show that despite the challenges they face, they refuse to let go of their goal, their dream. Marat's being his free speech and Jigme's being language fluency.
Self-portrait newspaper newspaper plan cheje ta parge jura ta mazu kalona recreate chege rola ne tinde divorba inba degi gumzen roja de keblo story kalona ngala problem khariyo na ngal language so te kyoyu ta kalo language command yora phi ineri inji ineri language khade ne bezun khase sine ya kuchi nga chian pe khale khawu tizamba ta dena language in tamba ta ye language tinde nga ya oma ha mo gu language nga kyoyu tu tamba ani language tu nga mandem je nga sega legyo rosh ta samda pil chido nga ngarang she wo samne ya language ki kange rosh cheje ya susu sem na igri shema thu rosh dede logic ta khalore thoya chedo ani nge tanda kamna yu ki self portrait dikyabe design yo di kharamna self portrait dikji kyablo ki idea chik de thanda european ki painter chur kare Louis David Lash do French ki painters to Krang is the painting your death of Marat led to the painting you chanting rough. Chesa dig painting the 30 Zamba Nala Krang is the we pick the bat of Nala medium the say you did Rundi and the relation of Kranky article to the color Shunga Gunju Chet on the Tiano Krambi say you shall. Chesa painting the Roshana up painting Jumotonsra, the colonel painting to the color, the photography, the painting you connection to the painting to connection pay up your euros. Painting this style the lens and Narangi the color feeling the part on express for chicken.
In this next work, Jigme once again reinvents a classic oil painting, Girl with a Pearl Earring, by Dutch Golden Age painter Johannes Vermeer. Except in his version, the girl is holding a can of Coca-Cola. Jigme's photograph shows an intersection of the modern and the past, as our eyes are immediately drawn to the iconic soda can held tight in the girl's grip. The soda can is a somewhat jarring contrast from the original inspiration, highlighting the shifts that have taken place throughout time in our society's commercial habits. The original painting beckons you to look at the earring, standing out stark and bold, bragging of class and wealth, whereas today, our eyes are lured to the Coca-Cola can, which in and of itself speaks of the wealth and cultural power of the billion-dollar corporation.
Painting the painting the girl with pearl earring any girl with pearl earring a pelanje any painting the recreate and Coca-Cola the lava jumuni painting the Coca-Cola the Yomara. You may know Coca-Cola lava jewel. The Coca-Cola the Tarik is a modern era nalola brand get a sachigo, the Mitsami how could they get a brand Chawara. The remote to Zuning Bursley. The Colonial Matisha. Coca-Cola the Tarik is a says that the Tuzuni the intersection to Chigurich. The day was done some locoji that part the Chagur.
While Jigme definitely took some creative liberties in incorporating contemporary cultural elements in his piece, his original inspiration point for wanting to recreate the painting remained in place, namely the use of reflective, almost glowing light, contrasting against a dark and shadowy backdrop. The singular pearl earring and the girl's eyes shine like pinpricks of light, made all the more apparent by the black background and dark coloring of the girl's garments.
We may cranky painting manguchi colore. Photographer mangu recreate chair crank painting the. We may keep painting the recreate chair by Gumzin to the Karalana. Cranky painting the Zunarola, any light ketota in a shadow in a to part the pin Karata New York, partnership, Chipaching and Rustir or crank. It is a bunny colore. Photographer mangu cranky painting the recreate chair, the peasant to change. Ini ro chagyo the idea ideally je tangi painting the recreate che ani tangarangi samlana yugyochi ipargere odine rojle.
While Jigme normally prefers to focus on single subject areas when taking photos, he decided for this photo shoot to take from Raghurai style, opting to incorporate multiple areas of focus. The outcome shows a journalistic approach to capturing a candid moment. Even though the picture was planned, no one is looking at the camera. The black and white color factor further accentuates the uncontrived feeling of the moment, stripping away any feelings of artificiality. The three girls seem to be unmindful of the camera's presence. They're all occupied doing their own separate thing, but you can feel the casual sense of ease amongst the girls, a random and candid moment caught by the lens.
사실 가서 본다 칼라사 뒤수 동반하기 좀 봐. 한번 타스 프로주다 칼로레 파게 네 칼로레 담마리게 배준 체인바 어떻게 그래 니워데 디파게 와디 겨로로 경진다 지금 동도 믹스데 요마비 베네 가레올라나 단다 디 야가기 파게니 단다 러구라이 레주라 프랑기 파나올라 디두 칼로레 미두주 제시기 좀 봐. 프랑기 파나올라 멀티 포커스 에리아 레고 파나올라 포커스 치고서 엘리멘트 망고베 수도 프랑기
Jigme also talked to us about how he responded to the artist blocks he faced early on in his career, namely by turning to the seniors of his field, who, in turn, pointed him towards books about photography.
Subject interesting the composition on problem the senior photographer in the kitchen team, the India problem team to and this the Melswell, the all come chella, and Tashi Delek to Zamba, Mambui, Malines, Kanki, but the photographer to Zamba, can camera to go level chat Marelas. Photographer can Yabula Mambu tapped on the Mambu law relic. Kuzo the Zamba, senior tapped in the lawyer Kozuimba, tapped in the law, and tapped in the law into Zamba, and near composition like. The color shukchimbu yuali to unparki understanding like you are shukchimbuli to zamba ani color the color jala jidangi ordinary jala the young interesting set to jura the jala jidangi pejina have to jina happy but interesting sha yoma yimbe that is color mangoji tap in the tadu how would zamba ani tap in interesting soje kan de parkya ore la jura the idea the do jidangi the Kangi Chitumba during it happened in Mopilo, and Chicolore, the color Nema, parking get us hold the Yora, Kunzuki Patula, Tashi Zamba, and Chicolore, Diki Kangin, Meor Charlie, Mutun Parigala, and Trotre in the Russia.
And on a more personal note, he told us about the places he would want most to take photos if he could. His dream locations, if you will.
Dream is such a so new, rather, neither the color yomas yo graphic hapochagu the Naranganishina, Tambudi Karelana, the Mount Everest Kikana project, a parky, Mount Everest la driving, planning to cheat. I ended with on a such a dealer to Tuna Dela to village. Chesanda Tangarangi planning a Kardana, and lo she choose a Malepola, kissing a Dotoina, a Mount Everest la doje Peggy, you gain, conducted Flore, Tandabudu, Mount Everest kind of parket. The Manguera, mean the Baria to Barriera, Tachi Clore, Yuzukinia that is about Tangarangi, Tondantone, Mount Everest, Barriawina, Georgie Barriatuna, Candida Gaines, the Dig Explore Chairman, the Samuchi to that. You were the such a dia, like he's seeing a Mount Everest on a success match in next day, Anika, Antarctica, Doji. Megil Dojayanga, making wildlife in every, making the Clore. Environment in area, making it a Chizojora, they not Tony Petru.
Thank you Tejen Kanto and the Yakbo Collective team for producing this wonderful interview segment of Gesang Jima's work. Tibet Fest allows us to support Tibetan artists and creatives, and this year we're thrilled to introduce Yakbo Collective and hope they can join us in person at Seattle Center in the near future. You can support Yakbo Collective by visiting their website at www.yakbocollective.com or give them a follow on Instagram at the Yakbo Collective. Sunam Chenzum is a Tibetan Scottish movement artist born and raised in Seattle, Washington. Chenzum's performance, titled Home, is a site-specific dance film, choreographed, performed, shot, and edited by herself. This piece navigates through her feelings of longing, confusion, acceptance, and love as Chenzum contrasts stories from her Bala's youth to her experiences of him as her father. She explores what is home for her as she dances through her childhood spaces while listening to his reflections. This work hopes to bridge the gap between two generations of Tibetans while embracing our diverse identities and our everlasting roots.
Sawang Namgyal, King of Longevity. Like my dad sewed me pants and shirts, all by hand sewing. When I come for winter vacation, most kids don't have nothing to wear. I have like almost like a new, but it's not exactly new. It was clothing that are really big, come from Goodwill, but they're really good material, and he cuts them and make it to feed me. And so by hand. He drinks like me. He drinks, but he has very good discipline. He usually says he will not drink before sun sets. And he told me he was a businessman like me, right? And he said, he traveled from Tibet to India in horse and donkeys. He bring salt, wool, things like that. And bring to India. India, he brings sugars, rice, things like that. So he said one of his discipline is he will never drink until he gets to his next guest house, and he put all the animals' luggage all put down, and they are tied. All the Tibetans they were like sitting, and we don't have everything. We are all in tent city only. And not only tent city, it's not a nice tent like what you're thinking. Okay, there's no rubber or nothing shit like that. So anyway, it's an Indian surplus tent. Indian military and police, they used it. So there's no bottom. It's just like tent, right? And things like that. And I remember my dad has 1 or 2 boxes. Maybe that's what his nitty-gritties or his main things are, right? So he always puts some bells on the top if somebody tries to steal it. And hearing we have no TV. When you're sleeping, you can stories or nothing, right? All things like it's their name. And later I saw what kind of place I was born. What landscape, this is everything around you is tied to. Just proud of him, even though I was chaos and it's now tied to 7. This Tibet sisters, after 40 years, I was born in 1997. She was 2007. How many 50 years. Altitude shot. After 50 years. So we were a little bit unsettled. We were 16 years old. Same school. We all kind of have some kind of non-having school. I used to make. So later when I was like 13, 14 schedule tribe, very hard to get. Thank you. My earliest memory is buying momos on Sunday market. Some vacation and momos are sold by individuals for being in a small basket. And there's more money than the beers. And then there are magazines. And I used to. And our markets are like once a week, Sunday market. But one of the things I remember, oh my God, there's like half apple, half banana, or half orange. Now I look back, other half was bad, so they cut it off. So the merchants also poor because the buyers are poor. Look back, it's funny, But that was my, like, how to say, like farmer's market. the blue sky. Oh my God, stars are so close. And when you are in a restaurant, looking from the door and window, looks like as the mountains are your hair. And then like the what do you call it? The clouds, it's almost going to come inside your door.
Thank you, Chenzom. Chenzom is now in her senior year at the Boston Conservatory in Berkeley, where she's earning her BFA in contemporary dance. Integrating her many passions, training, beliefs, and culture are important aspects of her work, and she hopes to offer healing and inspiration through all her artistic expressions. We'd like to thank our sponsors and supporters in our community whose contributions each year make it possible for us to host Tibet Fest. Second performance by Tipa is Relpa, a Tibetan drum dance that originated from the Kham region of Tibet. Please enjoy these stunning performances, beautiful textiles, and sounds of the handmade instruments. Thank you to the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts for their participation in this year's Tibet Fest. Despite the lockdown in India and COVID restrictions there, they were still able to get this performance recorded and edited for us just in time for Tibet Fest. Next up is a profile by Tenzin Topchen on the Tibetan Resettlement Project. This short film features stories about Tibetan immigration in the 1970s and Tibetan immigration through the Immigration Act of 1990. This is a great opportunity to hear the stories, struggles, and successes that led all these Tibetan immigrants to the Puget Sound region.
My name is Siring Yuthok, and I came to the U.S. in February of 1977. My husband's sister had been living in the U.S. for a while. When she became an American citizen, she sponsored us, and that's how we came here.
My name is Tenzin Wangel Dongtok, and I came to Seattle in 1984 along with my brother. We came here because our parents were here, Dongto Rinpoche and Sawan Chude. They came in the late 70s, 1978. They were invited, Rinpoche was invited through the late Sakya Daji Rinpoche of Punzo Korang, who his family actually came to Seattle in the early 60s, Daji Rinpoche, Sakya Daji Rinpoche and his family. So he invited Dongto Rinpoche in the 70s, late 70s. So my parents came in 78, and then we joined in 1984 along with my brother. We came straight from India to Seattle.
My name is Tuten Champa. I came to the United States in 1987. And I have an uncle who lived at Dharamsala on the mountain. He was a meditator. So he has a disciple, and he opened a new center in Seattle. It is called Dhamma Friendship Foundation. So he wrote me a letter saying, my uncle, I was in Italy. I was at Lama Tsongkhapa Institute of Buddhist Center, which belonged to Gelugpa tradition. I was translated there. So I replied my uncle, yes, I'm very happy to help you to translate in the United States at Dhamma Friendship Foundation in Seattle. This is how I came to the United States.
One of my few family memories, I think at the very beginning, around 80s, late 80s, was like our family driving for a long drive trip to Oregon. In Oregon, my parents had a friend, they had friends down there living in Warrenton, Astoria. And Warrenton is where a lot of the first Tibetans, the loggers, have settled. Coming from Maine, they came to Portland, Oregon to settle down in Oregon. So Warrenton was one of the small community, and I remember visiting down there to see our family friend, driving from Seattle, and my mom and dad and my brother and my little sister, and going down there, visiting the Tibetan family down there, and they also had young kids our age. So those experiences, I think, memories is something I still hold and dear, because there was very few experience of meeting Tibetans, so that's why it was one of those things that also very special, that every once a year, I think, we travel down to Warrenton to meet them and see the family down there. There were, I think, 3 or 4 Tibetan families, the logging families, that lived next to each other, and eventually they came up to settle in Seattle. So there were then they settled here and they raised the family here. So slowly they came up, but those were one of the memories that we had during that time.
Yes, at that time there's no, like right now we're Tibetan Association, they don't have, but there's a small Tibetan community of maybe 10 to 12 families. And I have a good relationship with the Dongdao family and the Doma Changchusang, and also Tashi Sholpa family. And occasionally I go to Dongdao family or Doma Changchusang, spend time there, have good time and good conversation, drinking tea, etc.
I think, as most immigrants coming to a new place, it's difficult for everybody. You leave what is comfortable, you leave your friends and everybody, and come to a strange land. But luckily for us, I think that it was not quite as difficult as most immigrants, simply because we didn't have a language problem. And also, we had relatives here. My husband's sister and mother were here. They were in New York. And I had two sisters going to school here. One was going to graduate school at CLU, and the other one was going to Bellevue Community College. So I think that, if we didn't have anybody, and if we had language problems, it would be much more challenging.
My part-time job was also His Holiness Dagje Rinpoche. He was invited by so many Dharma centers. So I have opportunity to travel with him to San Francisco Dharma centers, New York, LA, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, and some other places with the Rinpoche. I enjoy very much, and also other lamas. And in addition, also at that time, there's a Tibetan Education Network started by John Garfunkel. I think he's still in Seattle. So he invited me as a speaker for his network. So I have opportunity to go to many high schools, senior centers, and also one time at the University of Washington and one time at Bellingham University, talking about Tibetan culture, talking about Buddhism and the Tibetan situation in Tibet and Tibetans living in India. There's one guy, he took most of the responsibility. He was the director. And then Tibetans are Yudo Kunsang and Doma Changchusang. We are three Tibetan. Yudo Kunsang took great responsibility at the beginning, as well as Doma Changchusang. There are 5 or 6 Westerners. So we are 6 or 7 helping them to find job and also having them find sponsor, at least 3 to 6 months to give food and lodging until they find a job and able to cover their own expenses.
My mom was very much involved, Amla, at the resettlement project. In fact, she was one of the resource guide coordinator. So basically, any Tibetans who came, if they have issues, problems, needing help and stuff, she was one of the main contact person. So because of her, I was also involved.
Gunsangla and we try to get together as many as Seattle people who are not Tibetan, who has more experience than us. So we are able to form our group, and that group made brochures, and that group also try to find within the members, Tibetan Resettlement Project members, we also sponsored each of us 1 or 2 families. For example, I sponsored 1 family, then each of us sponsor 1 to 2 families, so we don't have to go to outside and find sponsor for them.
So yeah, I was also like part of the volunteers along with my mom at the before they arrived. So once they arrived, I was involved with my mom driving around, and my mom was helping people to get jobs, and I would also help to give rides back and forth. Since I was the only one who had the car at the time. It was a great moment and excitement for us in the community to know that there will be more Tibetans coming to settle in Seattle, and there was a lot of Americans, friends, who were involved in this, who really worked hard to accomplish this hosting of Tibetans and trying to find the right sponsors. And it was a lot of work, and there was a lot of people who, in our community who worked together to make it successful. So
we were very excited that we were going to have additions to our community, and I think the first group that came, I went to the airport with a couple of our officers to welcome the group. And then sometime after that, we hosted a welcome dinner for the newcomers and their sponsor families. Each of them, as you know, were staying with some sponsors' families. And so we had that. And then because I was working for the city of Seattle at the time, I was able to collect a lot of brochures about the city of Seattle, about transportation, banking, schools, for the newcomers. So I was able to provide all of that information to the new members of our community. The first organization that was formed in Seattle was the Tibetan Women's Association, and I was elected the first president. And soon after, there was talk in the community that they wanted to have a Tibetan association, and then we discussed, and then it was decided that we were too small too small a community to have multiple organizations. So we decided that it should be one organization. So the Tibetan Women's Association, in fact, then became the Tibetan Association of Washington.
Around the 80s, late 80s, I believe there was a Tibetan Women's Association at the time, and they've kind of, because we knew that there were going to be more Tibetans coming, and we started this, felt that the association was needed, and I think when they transfer, or when they tried to look for a president, I believe it was Tenzin Sampo, one of the first, and my brother Tenzin Sholpa was the vice president at the time, and but after that it was Tien Shakapala, and who was the president for a number of years. And I remember particularly of him being incredible, charismatic community leader who had great vision. And in fact, he was the one who kind of coordinated everybody to start the Tibet Fest, which is something that we are very proud of.
The first Tibet Fest, the association president was the late Shigube Jianla, and I was the vice president, and Chanzu Sangzhomla was the secretary, and Sidu Deshila was the treasurer. And it was actually Jianla's idea that we should apply to the Seattle Center to host Tibet Fest for 2 days, the weekend. And we were kind of dazed because we were a small community. There were not many of us who were actively working, and we thought, how in the world are we going to be able to put, performance all day long for 2 days in a row? But Tianla was very enthusiastic, very eager. He said, we can do it, and so in those days we didn't have funding, we didn't have any grants or anything like that. So it was basically just the small grants that the Seattle Center gives you, and then we just kind of made do with what we had. and put on Tibet Fest for the first time, and it became a success, and it's continued up until today.
I'm also a vendor for Tibet Fest as well as Folklife Festival. So first time, only Tibetan Resettlement Project, we have the booth. Then gradually we are able to bring individual vendors into Folklife Festival, and gradually we are also able to form Tibet Fest.
One of the first Tibet Fests, I was involved again as a volunteer, part of the group. We had famous singer Ngawang Kejala, Tejungla, and Ajudeni from Chaksamba. They all came as a special guest for the festival, and it was an amazing turnout we had, and I think a lot of people in the community and general public got to know more about Tibet issues, Tibet culture, and I'm happy that it's still continuing that way.
Next up, we have our second performance by the Trisung dance group called Tonggang Pogi Gorshe. Enjoy.
Yagi shupe ting cholai la, Yagi shupe ting cholai la, so ya la, amme ullo bu chunki teri, so ya la, amme ullo bu chunki teri. Yadawa su
So that's a wrap on Tibet Fest 2021. On behalf of the Tibetan Association of Washington, we'd like to thank all our guests, sponsors, and volunteers for their contributions to the 26th Tibet Fest. Without their help, we would not be able to do this. We'd also like to thank the professional studio crew at McCall Hall and for the video editing and shooting done by various community members. Most importantly, thank you to all our viewers for tuning in. If you are interested in learning more about our organization, visit us at our website at www.washingtontibet.org or on Facebook at the Tibetan Association of Washington, and finally on Instagram at Seattle Tibet Fest. We hope you are able to learn a little bit more about Tibetan arts and culture through this virtual format. We are so looking forward to next year when we can have an in-person event at the Seattle Center in August 2022. Until then, please stay safe, enjoy the summer and the rest of the year. Tujiche.
먼저 센세낭에 남아서 가고토로 중요배기 레오주기요. 아니 두지체. 은달에 먼저야 yapyo낭행기 진다초레 아니 산에기 페미 초레 한 믹스에데 시애틀 센터다 메코홀기 레민남라 두지체 쉐이 한 레구데라 먼저 페미 겐슈 퍼숨기 리슈라 토나나로 치스쉐이 네 니동 뉴스타질 표기 twe진디 아니 아도스 죽두브레 아니 양결 니동 뉴스상이 진다 개베 덤줄라 양결 제외게 아니 물람 슈유 도지체